Hi, everyone. So, today I thought it might be useful to talk about practicing yoga when you have an injury. If it's, once you've practiced long enough, for sure you've come to the point in your practice when you are feeling like you have some kind of an injury. So it could be that it's from the practice itself, or it could be, hi, Jolie, or it could be that you have an injury that is totally unrelated to practice. But however your injury occurred, for sure, once you practiced Ashtanga yoga for long enough, you're going to come up against this challenge. And it's a big one because it's really, really humbling and frustrating when you have an injury. Currently, I'm probably the most injured I have ever been practicing yoga, and I literally feel like I have to relearn everything, which is very, very, very humbling. And I think that's just kind of part of what goes along with having an injury is you have to not only truly dial it back, but you have to actually relearn what you're doing. So if you have an injury, when it's an acute injury, like when it has literally just happened and you're feeling any kind of like throbbing pain, shooting pain, I would suggest that you rest until like actually rest, most likely ice, maybe seeing a doctor. So like reading a book, rest. Do not do it's not like resting like sun salutations. I mean like you are really resting when it's a truly acute injury, because you need to kind of figure out what's going on before you get back onto your mat. So if you're having throbbing pain, if you're having shooting pain, this is the time to rest, see a doctor, reevaluate. So once the injury is, once the initial problem has come up and you kind of have a handle on what's going on, and you're ready to get back on your mat. So I would not suggest taking long off. I'm talking like 24, 48 hours, get it checked out, make sure you're safe to go. Once you're ready to get back on your mat. And I do suggest you get back on sooner rather than later, because in my experience, when you take too long of a rest, then it gets kind of stagnant and there's some atrophy, and it just gets more, it's, in my experience as a teacher and as a student, resting for a long period of time isn't usually very helpful. So get back on your mat, and then you do less. And maybe it's sun salutations, maybe it's skipping vinyasas. So when you are fresh off an injury, you do less. And you avoid anything that's hurting it. And of course, part of that is you have to actually really be able to identify what's hurting it. And sometimes your body sends you a signal and you obviously know exactly what is hurting you. And sometimes the signal is a little bit more subtle, and it might be really easy to ignore the signal. And that's why I suggest that you like get it checked out by a doctor and stuff. Because I think we develop a really high tolerance for pain doing Ashtanga, and we don't always know when our body is like sending us this message that you need to dial it back. So when you are working with an injury, you take a couple of days off to figure out what's going on, make sure it's safe to practice, especially when it's acute, and then you gradually start to practice again. Now, once you have started to incorporate PT into your life, if that's what you need, then you can hopefully start to figure out ways to work that into your practice. So for instance, broken ribs are so hard, and the thing with a broken rib is that it can happen literally from coughing really hard. I mean, it can happen from practicing. It can happen from so many. It happened. I was teaching once, and a student was doing a back bend, and we just heard a snap. And I wouldn't suggest resting 6 to 8 weeks, Erica. Like 6 to 8 weeks for broken rib. It does sound crazy, and it will probably not really help you a whole lot to actually rest that long. Like, knowing you personally, you're probably going to lose a lot of strength. Like, you've worked so hard for this strength. You don't want to lose it all in 6 to 8 weeks. But there's ways that you can practice with a broken rib. So you want to avoid those big extensions and expansions of the rib cage, obviously, and you're probably going to want to pull your rib cage in a little bit more. So this, I don't have on the best shirt for this, but if you know how your ribs come in like this, and there's this little space right here, like right where my buttons are, you're going to try to kind of like squeeze that in, like you had a pencil there and you were trying to hold the pencil in between your rib cage. So that could possibly help you a little bit, Erica, but avoiding overstretching. So one of the things that happens a lot in yoga is that a common injury, I guess is what I should say, is that we strain something. So you can maybe strain a ligament in your back, you maybe strain your hamstrings, or you overstretch. Hi, thanks for tuning in, you guys. We were talking about working through various stages of an injury in practice. So, and I know actually a few of you who have tuned in are currently injured or working through an injury. So I think maybe one of the most important things to mention is that you have to be really patient, like more patient than you can imagine. Really, really patient. But so a common thing is that we overstress or we strain something. And because we're stretching so much in yoga, it's really easy to overstretch something. So this happens with hamstrings a lot, hamstring strains, hamstring pulls. It happens with ligaments in our back when we're doing maybe a pose like Supta Karmasana. These are really common things that come up in primary series. So what do? If it's your hamstring that you're dealing with, important things to do, make sure you are not overextending your knees. And I notice this a lot with really flexible people, is that there's a tendency to to hang in the joints, to lock a joint. So that's not good, obviously. So keep the joint soft, particularly if you are dealing with a hamstring injury. It would be particularly making sure you do not overextend your knee. Hamstring injury, keeping the hamstring engaged. How do you do this when you're doing all this forward bending? My most basic suggestion is to push your heels, the heels of your feet, not your hands like I'm doing, down into your mat and try to draw them back toward you. This is an isometric contraction. They're not really going to move, but I want you to really think about that action in your forward bending. It's going to make them harder, and I think it will probably help you. If you're dealing with ribs like Erica, you're going to avoid moving into that pattern that probably got you the broken ribs in the first place. So overextension and really straining. So Erica, I hope you've talked to Nicole about this, because she did work through this injury before, but avoiding overextension can really help with that. If you are working with, because this is the thing that happens with injuries. So if you have a shoulder injury, I would not be at all surprised if you end up feeling it in your elbow and your wrist, because it's like this chain reaction. Same thing if you have a wrist injury. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts working its way up to your shoulder. Oh no, Erica hurt her ribs snowboarding. Well, that's at least a really exciting way to get injured, not like doing a back bend or something. So anyways, you want to make sure you're kind of paying attention to the chain reaction of your body and really nurturing it and being particularly careful around these joints when you're working with an injury and when you're just starting to get back into your practice. So if you have a ligament in your back that is overstretched, so that would be back pain around the spine is typical when people feel it. That again happens in primary series in particular. There's a lot of flexion in the back, and that overstretches the ligaments again. So you want to avoid stretching the ligaments. You want to move away from the pain. So both of these things that I just mentioned, hamstring and ligaments in the back, maybe talking to your teacher about moving into second series can kind of balance that out a little bit for you. So second series tends to work the other side of the body a little bit, and you might find it particularly helpful with injuries that involve knees, hamstrings, back. If you are solidly in primary series and not comfortable adding postures, then of second series, what you would do with a back injury is keep the back extended. So if you're in primary series, there's a lot of rounding of the back like this when we're forward folding. Try doing your forward folds with a long back and your pelvic floor engaged. So Pelvic floor is so key for so many different injuries. It's going to help protect your QL. It's going to help protect your back, your any kind of a back injury, really pelvic floor. And so one of the things that you would work on with your pelvic floor to strengthen it and to always tone your low belly. I say this all the time, but tone your low belly. And then think about pulling the pubic bone and the tailbone together and really feeling that connection at your pelvic floor, and then kind of scooping up the low belly, and then working on your forward bends like that. Or working on your back bends like that too, for that matter. I mean, basically you work on all the poses in that sense. So those are some of the really common injuries that come up, but I think that, you start to kind of work through these stages. So then you modify. Maybe you use props. You avoid poses that hurt you. And that's really important because it's easy to get warmed up and stop realizing that we're hurting, or the excitement of the room and stop realizing that we're hurting. So you want to really tune into that, pay attention to it, and kind of, if you have an injury, you might need to get on your mat with a game plan and then stick to it. See how you feel at the end of the day. Like, not at the end of the practice, at the end of the day, and then make a new game plan for your practice tomorrow. And this can be really helpful to work with a teacher, because in the moment, it's easy to lose track of how we're really feeling, because you do get warmed up, and there's the excitement and the energy of the room, and you need to, you want to reevaluate, but maybe you shouldn't. So I do suggest kind of making a game plan for yourself the night before. You can reevaluate a little bit as needed, but you don't want to be like, I plan to do half primary and then go in there and then do all of primary and half second like that. Because it's just too easy to keep moving into that injury, and a lot of them are because of patterns, and then we're not paying attention to the pattern anyways. Mental attachment to injuries, like getting rid of the fear that surrounds the injury once you've healed. Okay, so fear is a bitch, because when we have fear, it's like we already kind of are predicting the outcome. And when we have fear around an injury or any kind of a bad thing that's happened to us, then that's a samskara, that's a hala. You want to, if you're living in fear, then you are already kind of sure of what the outcome's going to be, Jackie. And when you're dealing with this fear in your practice, everything we do about practice is about observing it and then letting it go. Like when you're working on your seated practice, you are kind of watching everything come and go, and then you're letting it go. And you do the same thing in your asana practice. So with the fears around injuries once you've healed, is a heightened awareness around the actual injury. So hopefully you know what you did to hurt it. Two of my biggest injuries that I had happened outside of the practice room. So that was, it was kind of, I wasn't fearful about what I was doing in practice, but it was really scary getting back on my mat after that. If you have a PT, Jackie, then one of the most helpful things, I think, is to learn how to incorporate those exercises into your practice. And okay, so maybe not the exercises, but what is the exercise trying to accomplish? So Jolie can probably tell us a lot about this, because she's been in PT for her shoulder for ages, or not ages, but a few months anyways. And for me personally, I've learned with my injuries that I need to activate my glutes more. And so what I'm doing is way longer standing poses. Like, I'm holding my standing poses and I am guilty of frequently skipping standing postures altogether. So now I'm holding them and I'm doing all of them. I'm not cutting at Parsvatanasana like you do when you practice advanced series. I'm doing all the standing poses every day to work on building my leg strength. I'm being more cognizant of keeping my knees bent and my quads engaged. And my glutes working, and my back bends, and my hamstrings working. So I'm trying to find ways that I can take what I'm learning in physical therapy and apply it to my Ashtanga practice. So for you, Jackie, when you're really fearful of something, I think you have to kind of identify what's kind of causing the fear, which usually is you think that you already know what the outcome is, and you don't. And then like take what you've learned from your injury and just bring your focus to that throughout your practice, because one of the things that we're doing with our Ashtanga practice is trying to be more awake. Like we are waking up right now. And that might be moving slowly. That might be using props. That might be incorporating what you learn into PT so that you don't repeat the same patterns that caused you the pain in the first place, because that's one of the main things that we're trying to do in yoga is identify our emotional, physical, mental patterns that cause us pain and then let them go. And when you're scared, talk to your teacher too. Like that is one of the functions of a teacher, is to give you support in your practice, to give you ideas on how to work through injury. And what does Jolie say here? Yes, I've definitely learned more in the shoulder rotation, regarding shoulder rotation, to protect my shoulder and more aware. Yeah, I mean, you learn from your injuries, and hopefully these little lessons that you take away are going to prevent you from falling back into that pattern or making a mistake that that got you injured in the first place. And just know that you're not alone with these injuries. Like we all have them, and they suck. But, there's a way through them. And one of the things I always tell people, and I'm telling myself right now, that when you have an injury and you have to take time off from practice, or you have to dial back your practice, like you're gonna lose some strength. You might lose some flexibility, whatever. But in my experience as a teacher and as a practitioner, you get it back. And usually it happens a lot quicker than you think it will. So it's ultimately really more important to let the injury heal so that you can get to that place where you are getting it back. So I hope that was helpful. There's lots of other little things that you can do outside of your practice, like ice and turmeric. But like really ice, like I bought a bunch of ice. I'm going to try to take an ice bath later today. I probably will hate it. I don't know. Maybe I'll put it on my Instagram story if I wear a bathing suit. So any other questions about this? Okay, well, thanks you guys so much for tuning in. Oh, and I am promoting my primary series interactive course. And in that course, there's a whole section on injuries, a section with various injuries that are really common in primary series. So I'm definitely going to spend time covering that because it's so important, and you get so discouraged, but don't quit. We'll get through it. I think in our practice, we experience the pain, and the practice itself is the place where we heal it. Yeah, I mean, the practice brings a lot of stuff up, and it's not only the physical pain, it's like the pain of our patterns, right? Our patterns cause us pain. We have good patterns too, but there's a lot of patterns that cause us pain, either physical, mental, emotional, and it comes up in practice, and that's why we have to kind of like figure it out and then let it go, hopefully. Hala hala. All right, you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your support and your questions, and I hope it was helpful. And if you want to ask me a question, you can always message me. Otherwise, watch the replay if you missed the beginning so that you can hear. Thank you, Maria. So you can hear the whole thing. So thanks, you guys. Have an awesome evening, day. Bye.